Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to another episode of the Sweet Nothings podcast, your home of relaxed, funny, and informative chats about the love of eating. On this podcast, we talk all about the latest food trends, controversial opinions, and all things edible. Whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple Music, one of those weird, obscure podcast things because that's the kind of person you are, or you are watching on YouTube, it is lovely to see you here, whether this is your first time or you're coming back. My name is Kelly. I'm an all-round kind of food nerd. You can find me at Maverick Baking on embarrassingly pretty much every single social media platform and at maverickbaking.com if you ever need a cheeky wee recipe or two. This month's podcast is one that I have wanted to make for quite a while, and it's on a subject that I've written about before. It's on a subject that I talk to a lot of people about, and it's something I have kind of a lot of strong opinions on. And that is our kind of painfully collective guilt around eating. But before we get into that, I want to talk about this month in food, some food news, and of course, the weird and wacky world of food trends. It only makes sense, I think, to dive straight into this month's kind of bizarre TikTok food trend, because TikTok just seems to be the new factory for all things weird when it comes to food. We are kicking off by talking about this watermelon and mustard trend. Many of you, if you're on TikTok, if you watch any Instagram reels, perhaps even through Facebook videos, depending on your favorite social media, or, perhaps you're a normal person who isn't exposed to this kind of thing. But the watermelon and mustard trend has appeared and disappeared in equal speed, and I think we're all quite collectively grateful for that. So just to kind of fill you in on what this is if you did miss it, this guy on TikTok, currently if you are watching on YouTube on kind of video format, you'll be able to see me kind of circling him at the moment. This gentleman decided to show TikTok one of his kind of favorite things to eat, which is watermelon kind of sliced into big chunky triangles about the size of a slice of pizza, but like a Pizza Hut or Papa John's deep dish pizza kind of deal. And he essentially takes what looks like the French's brand American yellow mustard, squirts on, in my opinion, too generous an amount, and takes a big bite out of it. Says it's fantastic. Since then, our queen of all TikTok food trends, Lizzo, has also jumped on the trend, and a few other people have tried it. Kind of food bloggers have tried it. Websites like Delish have tried it, and I'm gonna jump right in with some controversy and say that I can actually imagine this working quite well. The main reason I haven't tried this, not only out of fear, but also because genuinely in the UK it is, or at least in my part of northeast Scotland, it is an absolute nightmare to try and find any watermelon that actually tastes good. It all just kind of tastes of vague watermelon flavoured water, not in a good way. Whenever you go abroad, whenever you go to any country that actually sees the sun on a regular basis, a British person or any Northern European person biting into watermelon is a sight to behold. We literally have no idea what it tastes like until we do. So on that basis, I haven't tried it. But honestly, I quite love trashy American yellow mustard, even more so than I like English mustard or Dijon or whole grain or any of the kind of what you might call proper mustard varieties. I love a trashy American yellow mustard. And I can kind of see that weird, bold, salty, tangy mustard flavor actually going quite well with the sweet, mellow flavor of a watermelon. It's a bit like having cheddar cheese with apple pie, or having cheddar cheese with fruitcake, or any other kind of bizarre sweet and salty, rich and light combination you can think of. We know they work. We just don't want to be outcast by the societies that we inhabit. But I truly do not hate the watermelon and mustard trend. I think this is creative. I think it's a fantastic exhibition of how bizarre the human palate can be, in that many people who tried this didn't know whether they loved it or hated it. In food news this month, taking a small kind of departure from the trends, seeing as there haven't been really too many this month, probably because we've all been too busy getting back out to restaurants and getting out in the limited sunshine many of us have. So many of us probably have just been drinking beer and eating ice cream instead of meals, which I fully condone for legal purposes. Getting into food news this month, the Starbucks pink drink has finally hit UK Starbucks stores. You may have no idea what I'm talking about here, or it may be ringing a very distant and 2016 flavoured bell in the back of your head. The Starbucks pink drink was this kind of Instagram and Pinterest phenomenon approximately 5 to 7 years ago, I would guess. And honestly, I haven't really heard about it since. And for some reason, Starbucks made this big announcement. I got an email from them letting me, not directly from Starbucks, no one is that important, but one of their promotional emails just kind of advertising that the pink drink was finally here. And my question, as always, for pretty much any new Starbucks release is why? There are so many good things you could do with your actual coffee. I really don't know why they have to jump on things like this, but if you are unaware of the pink drink, it's one of these items that was considered like a, and I quote heavily, secret menu item. So it was one of these things that random kind of Californian Valley girls would be able to order. They would just walk up to a Starbucks, order a pink drink, and come out with this mysterious thing that wasn't an actual menu item, apparently. And it briefly, obviously, went very viral on Instagram, on Pinterest, things like that, because it is extremely pretty. It's this sort of creamy pink colour, and it usually has ice and strawberry slices kind of floating around the top, but it just has this thing that it reminds me of like a Japanese cherry blossom tree. It's a beautiful colour, and you can definitely see why teenage girls were obsessed with getting it or trying to get it or creating it, you know, a few years ago. But why are we receiving this in the UK now in 2021? I have absolutely no idea. It is obviously still as Instagrammable as ever. From what I've seen of the promotional pictures, for some reason on Starbucks website, the picture is approximately 2.5 millimeters wide. But to confirm what this actually is, in the UK, they're not calling it the pink drink. So if you walk in and order a pink drink, you may have an eyebrow raised in your direction. They're calling it the pink coconut Starbucks refresher. Yes, refresher, and that has an actual trademark against it. Obviously, the pink coconut Starbucks refresher, which I am commenting on through fair use Starbucks before you come at me with a lawsuit. The name really isn't as kind of catchy as pink drink, but apparently it's the same thing. It consists of a crisp strawberry acai refresher drink, combining sweet strawberry flavours with creamy coconut milk, making a fruity and refreshing sip. It sounds pretty good. It sounds very summer appropriate. I have never tasted acai before because I live in Scotland. And it's, from what I gather, it's either a kind of berry only found in South or Central America or the Polynesian islands. It's this incredibly dark kind of blueberry colour, deep purple, bluish stuff. But it always looks very nice. And apparently this has some acai and some strawberry and some coconut milk in it. It's definitely not the worst Starbucks product that we've seen advertised recently. It feels very summer appropriate, and as long as it's, you know, Instagrammable, I guess that's all that really matters with new products when they're trying to boost sales mid and post-COVID. But let me know your thoughts. What do you think of this? Would you try it? I would try it. Can I be bothered walking to Starbucks and saying out loud, can I have a pink coconut Starbucks refresher, please? Absolutely not. I will instead maintain the strong, ever bisexual energy of an iced coffee or a cold brew, because I can't bring myself to say refresher out loud. The final kind of piece of big British food news this month has been on my radar firmly since, again, a promotional email came my way, because apparently it's 2002 and that's how I get my news now. This came in the form of Cadbury's 3 new inventor bars. If you don't follow the shenanigans of Cadbury, every 1 to 2 years, or even 2 to 3 years, on a semi-regular basis, Cadbury basically invite the British public to invent a chocolate bar that they would like to see on the shelves. Cadbury then name the kind of top 3 flavors, they release them, and I think based on sales and based on public votes, one of them remains. Though I'll be totally honest, I have never seen any of these ever remain after the promotional campaign. You always see the 3 flavors on the same stand in whichever supermarket or corner shop you go into. I swear I have never seen any of these actually stick around. So take from that what you will. But I do like that they do this. Public participation is always quite fun. We love a chocolate democracy, and they do often come out with some flavors that Cadbury might not have done so of their own accord out of fear, basically. So the 3 flavours that have appeared are Fizzing Cherry, the No Frowny Brownie, and the Banoffee Nut Crumble. Do let me know which one you think you would like to stick around, but let's look at them in more detail. The Fizzing Cherry is Cadbury Dairy Milk Chocolate with soft chews of fruity cherry pieces, tingly, crackling, popping candy and crunchy biscuits, which I must say the descriptions feel a bit like when you need to meet the word count of an essay. You don't have enough to say. Fruity cherry pieces, of course it's fruity. Cadbury, it's a fruit. Anyway, I don't mind the sound of this. I'm not the biggest fan of popping candy. Always makes me feel like I've consumed some kind of poison. But the flavour combinations are kind of cute. It's a little bit summery. It's a little bit different. The No Frowny Brownie consists of Cadbury Dairy Milk Chocolate with gooey chocolate brownie chunks, golden salted caramel chips and crumbly biscuits. Why the biscuits are there, I have no idea. Why there's salted caramel in there doesn't really fit the brownie thing, but I guess it's popular. And as long as the brownie doesn't get too lost in the kind of basic milk chocolate flavour, this one could probably be a public favourite, if a little bit on the safe side for me. And finally, the Banoffee Nut Crumble consists of Cadbury Dairy Milk Chocolate with banoffee pie inspired fudge pieces, golden almond caramel pieces, and crunchy biscuits. This is the one that has raised my eyebrows the most because honestly, the flavour itself, the title is something that really intrigued me. It's something that I thought had a lot of potential, but banoffee pie inspired fudge pieces has made me just put my interest back in its box, because could you not have done some banana chips? Could you not have put some actual toffee in there? What is a golden almond caramel piece? And again, why have you just thrown biscuits in there? Like, all 3 of these flavours just contain crunchy biscuits. For what? Just to pad out some texture? I don't really know. They're definitely not the most inspiring inventor bar flavours I've ever seen. We've definitely had some funky ones in the past. There was a blueberry one. There have been coffee ones in the past that were pretty good. I think of all 3, the No Frowny Brownie will probably win the public vote. After polling you guys on Instagram and on YouTube, the No Frowny Brownie and the Banoffee Nut Crumble were favourites. I understand why, but if I do see these, I will be picking them up to try them because my nosiness will always get the better of me. But do let me know what you think. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably a food lover or even a cook. If you want exclusive digital recipe guides on subjects like the best way to make, bake and eat cookies, or a cute little book of breakfast ideas, head to Maverick Baking's shop on Etsy. However, food news and trends of June 2021 aside, let's get into the thrust of this week's episode, if you will. My neighbour's dog agrees. He always picks a fantastic time to have his daily meltdown. I wanted to talk to you guys today about the concept of feeling guilty around food, whether that's the way you eat, how you eat, what you eat, when you eat. But before we get into kind of my thoughts on the subject and some advice I'd like to give for those of you who do feel a kind of very specific guilt around eating, I wanted to poll you guys for your opinions, so I did so on social media, and of course, always anonymous. I would like to share kind of some of those results with you just now. I must say, even though the response rate was very high this time, higher than it has been for kind of past podcast research questions, the results are always a little bit kind of saddening just because of the subject that we're touching on. It's never nice to see that people feel guilt around food, but let's talk about that. One of the first responses I got to the question, do you ever feel guilty around food? Do you ever feel guilty about eating? One of the first responses I got was yes. Bad foods like chocolate and crisps, etc., versus good food such as vegetables and fruit. Bad foods equal a treat versus good foods equaling boring, when in fact all food is to be enjoyed. And I couldn't agree more with that. And I think a lot of people would be able to identify with this kind of weird dichotomy that many of us have been taught to feel around food, rather than just kind of concerning ourselves with the nutritional values of food or the source of where our food comes from or the cost of our food. Many of us simply have this kind of simplification in our brains, which I understand can be helpful for some people, especially if you're making quick decisions on buying something. But I think many of us have this split between good foods and bad foods, or slimming foods and fattening foods, or healthy foods and unhealthy foods. I really don't think media of the past kind of 40 years has helped this whatsoever. Ever since the dawn of diet culture in the 1980s, people have started ring fencing things into inappropriate or appropriate, okay, not okay, what's acceptable to eat when you're trying to lose weight, what's unacceptable to eat, full stop. And I can fully relate on the kind of bad foods and good foods thing. Chocolate and crisps, etc., you're basically never encouraged to eat them, sometimes even taught that they are one of the worst things you can put in your body, and yet they're sold to us as this treat, this luxury, something to be enjoyed, something that people sneak out of their desk drawer after lunch, something that your grandma buys for you and says, don't tell your mum, something you get and hide the wrapper in your car because you don't want other people to know about it. We're given this almost, don't touch the big red button, wet paint, do not touch, temptation into these foods, which are, of course, completely normal and completely unbiased in their very existence. And yet so many of us just circle them off as unacceptable or secret or naughty, guilty. It's a very strange way of thinking, and yet so many of us seem to do it. Someone else responded saying that they struggle with guilt when they're eating more than others, and that they feel guilty for finishing their food first. Now, this is kind of one of the things I wanted to touch on when I asked about the way you eat, because it's not only the food itself that we're passing over our lips, but also the manner in which people eat things that can often lead to this weird guilt or self-consciousness when you're eating something. And I think speed can definitely be an example of this. If you are the person who's finished your meal first, if you're the one who eats very fast, you'll often get comments from people regarding that, or you might just notice it and think, do I eat too much? Do I eat too quickly? Am I greedier than these other people? Am I more gluttonous than these other people? When in fact, you probably just either chew quicker or your body's good at digesting it, so you don't need to chew as much as other people, or other people are talking while you were eating. And yet there's still this strange twang of guilt or shame that people can feel around that. And again, when you're eating more than other people you're with, whether those other people are eating less because they're in the presence of others, because they're in the presence of a specific person that they like and they don't want to kind of show themselves eating too much, it's a strange kind of social impact that I think many people could also kind of testify to. Other people have said that they very rarely feel guilt when they're eating. They don't put weight on and make sure they do a lot of walking, but they would feel bad if they ate more takeaway food. And similarly, someone else says, I hope no one does feel guilty. All food is delicious. Thank you. That is exactly the energy we are bringing today. Other people responded just with a simple yes, not wishing to go into much more detail. Someone else, in fact, a few people have said, and this was one of the most impactful kinds of responses, were from people saying, yes, every meal I eat is a guilt trip. Now, of course, on the face of it, if you are someone who is fortunate enough to have had or has now got a very good relationship with food, a very casual, comfortable, and normal, if I dare say, relationship with food, you may think that this seems very dramatic or very kind of shocking that someone would feel guilty about everything they eat. But I do think a lot of people, and especially a lot of women, without making this a gendered issue, but especially a lot of women would be able to identify with, are your meals too big? Are you eating too often? Are you eating at the right times? What you're having for your meals, is it good enough? Is it healthy enough? Is it trendy enough? It's something I think a lot of people wrestle with. A few more people just said yes, yeah, every other day, every single time I eat almost anything, every waking moment, all the time. Someone said they would probably be the same for all the women in their family too. And this is something that I think many people, especially of a certain age, could identify with. My mum, for example, if you're listening, hi. But my mum, for example, is someone who kind of went through her whole adult life cradled in the diet culture that the 1980s created, when the aerobics classes and when the low-fat diets and Atkins and stuff started coming around. Scottish Slimmers, Slimming World, Weight Watchers, all of these things came off the back of the late 80s into the early 90s as she was becoming a grown woman, a mother, etc. And many women her age, at least from what I've seen from a UK perspective and from what I understand of somewhat of a North American perspective as well, were kind of caught up in this thing of you need to be perpetually on a diet. You need to be perpetually counting calories, losing weight, trying the next big fad, trying the next exercise DVD when they were still a thing, And it's something that does pass down to generations of women, whether you were someone who went through the 50s and 60s and 70s, maybe a bit larger than your friends, you pass that down to your daughter, she passes down to her daughter. It's something that can really permeate whole families. And so it's interesting that people, of a similar age are finding that. Slightly aside from that, someone else has said that they feel guilty about their midnight cooking and snacking habits. See, even that, it's such a basic thing. If your body is hungry at midnight and your body clock works around being awake and eating at midnight, that's it. That's you. Your body likes to be awake and to eat at midnight probably. And yet it's something that can cause guilt just because the norm is either not to do that, or some people do fully judge you for doing that. It's truly, truly odd the way our little monkey brains do this to us. But on a slightly lighter note, we had another person saying they rarely feel guilt around food. So a mix of responses I found from social media, but definitely every single woman who responded does have either, some light guilt around one particular part of their eating habits or their diet, and some people feeling consistent and non-stop guilt from the sound of it, in eating anything. And this is kind of why I'd wanted to ask the question. It's something I'd noticed a lot growing up, as I said, from the women I was around, whether it was my grandma, my mum, my mum's friends, my friends' mums, any woman in my life over the age of 25 basically has discussed something about their diet or their weight or about exercise. It's just this, it seems to be this sort of perpetual cause that people seem to pursue, and it needs to be something that everyone is on side with, having to pick apart their choices for every single thing they eat. You hear people trying to justify what they've chosen to eat, or how they've chosen to eat, how much they've chosen to eat, when it's such a basic part of human survival that it's so strange we've found ourselves in this position. I do want to thank, obviously, everyone who did share their opinions. As always, I do keep these things anonymous, so if you do ever want to get in touch to share your opinions on past kind of podcast subjects or current ones, whatever it is, do let me know. Names and everything are never revealed, and it's really good to get a kind of spread and mix of responses in relation to all things edible. But I wanted to kind of touch on today some of the reasons why I think guilt around food is still such a deeply permeating problem, even in, an age where we are able to make the most informed decisions we've ever been able to make in human history when it comes to our diet. And it seems, even as someone who is ever present on social media, an advocate for many aspects of social media, and even someone who has, a slightly larger following on social media than other people, it cannot be ignored that social media has had a strong impact on this guilt around food and around eating. I think Instagram is probably the main source of this. Obviously, apps like TikTok are becoming a bit more present and are growing a kind of food section, whether it's people sharing recipes, what I eat in a day type things, just meals, doing little vlogs and showing what they eat throughout the day. I think Instagram was the real kicker in bringing food guilt to a whole new generation, I will say, and obviously I'm not trying to condemn the whole app for that kind of thing, because it's just something that is conditioned into the human brain to find self-loathing in everything, she said, smiling. But I think Instagram especially has caused a very particular kind of guilt around food, and in a really Black Mirror kind of way. I think part of it is guilt around meals when they aren't photogenic enough. And if you're not an avid Instagram user or social media user of any kind, perhaps this is something that sounds truly dystopian, to use a very popular phrase nowadays, and you're not wrong. But, there are people who go to specific bakeries, specific coffee shops, specific lunch places, brunch spots, because they know they will get an extremely photogenic plate of food. And it doesn't really matter what that plate of food tastes like. It doesn't really matter how much they pay for it. If that is a photogenic meal, they're going to get it. And the flip side of that, of course, comes from when you don't really like that kind of food. If you're someone who is on Instagram, you love Instagram, but you're also a bit of a particular eater, or your favorite foods are simpler foods, if you're someone who likes to go to Greg's for breakfast, if you're someone who likes to pick up, just a plain bakery product for breakfast, or you're someone who instead likes to go to a greasy spoon cafe and get a cheap fry up. Of course, these things aren't photogenic. They're often the very opposite. They're often very unattractive in front of a camera, but they're delicious and they're satisfying. But there's this kind of guilt of, oh, well, that's not going to look good if I want to post that on Instagram, or this isn't really going to fit in with the kind of content I'm sharing today. And as bizarre as it sounds, this has influenced, I've seen it in first person, this influenced people's behavior. I found myself, going to places because I know and have seen that they prepare Instagrammable food. I met my partner, Francesco, through his restaurant, which served very Instagrammable food, very delicious Instagrammable food, but very Instagrammable food. And it's bizarre that we've gotten to this point, but social media can do that. Equally, social media creates these trends that people feel if they're not jumping on the trends, or if the food they're eating isn't trendy, again, it can cause this sort of, well, I don't know what to eat. Should I eat avocado toast because it was trendy? You know, if you go back to 2017, 2018, should I eat avocado toast because it's trendy? Should I buy a rainbow cake for my birthday because that's the trendy cake? You know, it can really influence what people think is like the done thing to do with eating at any given time. And furthermore, of course, if you see people eating portion sizes on social media, whether it be on vlogs, what I eat in a day videos, just regular kind of Instagram posts, if you were to see someone who is, you know, extremely athletic, say you follow a Victoria's Secret model or some other kind of model, you follow Gigi Hadid or Bella Hadid or Kendall Jenner, anyone like that on Instagram or on TikTok, and you see the size of the portions they eat, you will look at that probably as someone whose body type is vastly different to theirs, like myself, and you will think, oh, should I only eat one slice of toast when I eat toast? Should I eat meals that consist of a large amount of protein and no carbohydrates? Should I eat like this? Should I eat that much? And even if it doesn't register as deeply as that in your head the first time you see it, it might come up the next time you eat that particular foodstuff. You might think, oh, maybe I do have too much cheese on my salad. Maybe I do eat too many fries. Maybe I do order too large a drink. It's just one of these things that in our strange sympathetic brains, where we recognize other human behavior and we love to mimic, we love to be included. We don't like to be the odd ones out. And you want to kind of follow what these other people are doing. And it's something that, while you would have seen it in magazines, on TV, social media has had a truly unique impact in that sense, I think, on the guilt we feel around what we eat. Diet culture, of course, is the kind of main driver of any of this food guilt. That is undeniable. Diet culture, as I kind of touched upon, having begun in the mainstream when people started, you know, gaining weight collectively in the UK, in the US, and other countries. When we saw the dawn of popular diets, you know, we had these big mainstream diets that were no longer just reserved for people who wanted to look like Hollywood stars. They were for everyone. Everyone knew about the Atkins diet. Everyone knew about Rosemary Conley. Everyone knew about Weight Watchers. Everyone knew about Jenny Craig. Everyone knew about the South Beach diet, the Master Cleanse. And nowadays, you know, it's keto, it's low carb, it's paleo, it's intermittent fasting. And it's one of these things that even if you are not someone who is trying actively to lose weight, you know, you're maybe just not particularly happy with everything about your shape, as I'm sure many of us will feel. But you see these diets, and every single time, every time, even though you know that these things come and go as often as people change their underwear, you still think, oh, that's interesting. Oh, I wonder if I could try that. I wonder if that would work for me. And they very, very rarely do, because without changing your lifestyle, these things will never work for any kind of sustainable change in your weight, in your health, but they permeate everything. When you see keto on the rise, you begin to wonder if by eating a bowl of white rice with your dinner, if you're some kind of carnal sinner. And you begin to wonder when intermittent fasting, which if you ask me is just, you know, reducing your calories to a specific window, also known as starving yourself or just being on a diet, but for gym bros. Intermittent fasting, again, if you hear that one of your work colleagues is doing intermittent fasting, you might look at your breakfast that you're eating at, God forbid, 8 o'clock in the morning and think, should I be eating this? Am I actually hungry now? Do I do this out of habit? Why isn't she doing it? Why isn't he doing it? And it again becomes this bizarre mimicry and questioning of our own behaviors based around our own physical needs because of this guilt we have. Another huge factor, I think, is the rise of consciousness around what it is we're eating. Moving aside from weight loss for a second, because of course not all food guilt is kind of circling around weight loss, our growing consciousness of the planet, of the environment, of animal welfare, of our own welfare, while it's obviously great in that it's going to produce results that will eventually, hopefully continue to keep planet Earth inhabitable and enjoyable to be upon, but diets such as vegetarianism, such as veganism, making conscious choices about the products you put in your supermarket basket can also lead to this guilt around what you're eating. Veganism especially being something that's seeing such a sharp rise in people who are becoming strict vegans. Normal people dropping a bit of meat or a bit of dairy here and there. Some people stepping away from consuming things like palm oil. Some people purchasing less avocados or chocolate or coffee when they realize the huge distance it has to travel to get to them if they live somewhere like Northern Europe, for example. And, even though alternatives to the normal diet of whichever culture you are part of can be very costly or very inaccessible, because you see it becoming popular, because you see it becoming more publicly common, you can then often feel this guilt around what you're choosing. Do I eat too much meat? Do I eat too much dairy? Should I eat them at all? Should I be eating more tofu? Oh no, wait, tofu's bad because soy is grown by all of these irresponsible companies that are ruining biodiversity across the planet. Should I buy this imported fruit and vegetables? Or should I just stick to eating local all the time? I can't afford vegan convenience foods, but I feel bad for not eating them. All of these things taken together are really too much for us to handle a lot of the time. And I think this is what leads to people feeling overwhelmed, to what leads people to feeling shameful in whatever they're eating, especially if, again, God forbid you get any comments on how you eat or what you're eating. If someone comments on the fact that you're using cow's milk in your tea when everyone's drinking oat milk nowadays, or, how you've had an extra slice of pizza when other people haven't, or if you're the fastest to finish your meal, if you're the slowest to finish your meal, if you decide to order a salad when everyone else is ordering burgers, if you decide to have a gin and tonic when other people are having beer, you decide to have non-alcoholic beer. There are so many things that, people may quite innocently comment on just because it's unusual, that can lead to you developing this complex of, oh my God, every single thing I eat is an overwhelming thought process. And it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Fortunately, many of us go through these kind of battles when we are teenagers, and we do tend to become a bit more comfortable with them as adults. But many people don't. Many people find, as an adult, when they start doing the food shopping for themselves, that they are overwhelmed not only with the amount of products available to them nowadays, but the vast range of emotions that these foods can evoke in you even before the point of purchase. How do I eat? When do I eat? What do I buy? What shouldn't I buy? What should I keep secret if I do buy it? What is and isn't okay? What is trendy? What is considered old-fashioned? What's considered chuggy, dare I use that word? And, paring it back, life is difficult enough. Oh my God. Life over the past year, especially, has been challenging enough that as soon as we go to indulge in not only one of life's necessities, but also one of life's greatest pleasures, you can't fight every battle. You can't be ethical, low carb, high protein, X, Y, and Z all day, every day. It's exhausting. And it seems so patronizingly simple for me to tell you that just eat what you like. But that really is what you kind of have to tell yourself sometimes. But in exactly the same way that you don't feel guilty for the other pleasures in your life. That's how I would recommend anyone kind of face shame around food. You, for example, probably do not feel guilty when you have sex with someone you find attractive, or when you have sex with your partner, with your husband, with your girlfriend, with your lover, with your whoever. As long as it's safe and consenting, you probably don't feel very guilty for having an orgasm, for masturbating, for anything. It's a basic human need. It feels fantastic, and you often feel better once you've done it, or you feel calmer once you've done it. And yet, It's not something that you would feel inherently guilty for having done. Similarly, you wouldn't feel guilty when you get home from a run or from the gym because it's made you feel good. You wouldn't feel guilty about maybe spending half an hour watching TV before you go to bed or playing video games for a few hours on your only day off of the week. The guilt around these things is so much smaller than the guilt around, oh, I had fish and chips for dinner last night, which means I've got to skip breakfast now. It's the most crippling and common form of guilt and shame, and it's just something I think we all need to learn to be more aware of, to relax ourselves around where we can, and remember that, oh my God, we are human beings. We are animals that just learned to stand on our back legs and talk more clearly than others. We are not special in that sense. You cannot be this, highly efficient robot that only consumes the most nutritious, the most ethical, the most organic all the time. It's impossible if you want to stay mentally balanced. Obviously, it's good to eat a fruit and vegetable now and again if you want to be able to poop properly. Obviously, it's good for you to be able to keep yourself nourished enough to have the energy to get through the day. But aside from that, unless your food is making you feel physically unwell, eat what you want. It sounds too simple. It sounds, as I said, really patronizing, but not enough of us do it. Too many of us pick apart our choices, or we pick apart the things that we do and don't like. Why do I only like unhealthy foods? Why don't I like X, Y, and Z vegetables? You like what you like. You dislike what you dislike. Know what works for you, what works for your body. Allow yourself to have the things you are craving, or your life will be less pleasant. If you stop yourself from having things that you enjoy and having things that relax you or make you feel better or make you calm down or just, make you feel good, you're going to want them more. You're going to feel worse, and you're then going to resent the quote unquote healthier choices that you are making because you're restricting yourself so much. It's just something to be mindful of, something to relax around, and just putting yourself first. A wise man in my own family once said to me that your body is more important than anyone else's body. Whether your guilt is around eating animals, whether your guilt is around the ethics of something, whether it's organic, where it's come from, what it cost, where it came from, anything. Your body is the most important part. Your health, both physical and mental, your enjoyment, your time here is so limited. As cliche and nihilistic as that might sound, your time is so limited. You only get to eat, a handful of times a day. Make it good. Make it enjoyable, and make sure that, you're treating yourself as well as you would treat anyone else. But that is all I kind of want to touch on in today's podcast. I really hope you guys have been able to take something from this, whether it's released some steam in the guilt that you do feel, whether it has, opened your eyes to the fact that you're not the only one who feels a certain way about a certain way of eating, etc. Whether it's just been a nice way to pass 40 minutes or so, having me whispering sweet nothings about food in your ear. But I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you guys so much, as always, for listening or for watching, whichever platform you are consuming this on. Thank you so much. I love talking to you guys. I love you guys being here. And do let me know if there are any specific subjects you would like me to touch on in future, because I'm always open to talking about anything edible. I have been Kelly. This has been the Sweet Nothings Podcast, your home of relaxed, funny, and informative chats about the love of eating. I can't wait to see you for the next one. You're listening to the Sweet Nothings Podcast. If you want more recipes, food reviews, and knowledge on all things edible, you can find it at maverickbaking.com and at Maverick Baking on YouTube.